Welcome to the Ricky Mathews Show from the Citizens Bank Studios as we continue to celebrate all the amazing people who are working in the trenches across this great state to try to make Mississippi a better place to live, work, and play. Man, do I love telling these stories. Hey, listen, I ran across a wonderful quote from Muhammad Ali. It was in this digital history book that I get every morning. I refer to that often. And in this particular case, it was recognizing the rumble in the jungle back in 1974 when Muhammad Ali defeated George Foreman. And he said this along the way. He said, once we realize we are all members of humanity, we will want to compete in the spirit of love. Now, that sounds lofty, I know. But, you know, in this election season with the actual election day coming up next week, I think it's a good reminder for us to remember that once we compete, once we do realize that we're all members of humanity, we will want to compete in the spirit of love. I've said this often recently, and while this is not a political show, I've been amazed. I've got Democrat friends and I've got Republican friends, and I love when we have conversations about policy and differences of opinion, but we do so respectfully. Too often, because of social media algorithms, they literally are designed to want us to fight. And the more we fight, the more we're engaged, the more money they make. And so it's kind of sad, actually, when you think about it, that the algorithms are set up for us to try to hate each other. What we say to each other too often is not something, is what we say to each other on social media is too often something we wouldn't say to someone's face. And I like to quote this the speaker Jason White, who often said it's hard to be mad at somebody or hard to hate someone that you know. So we talk a lot about that here, that I think the most successful politicians in the state of Mississippi are those who they may have differences of opinion, but they respect one another and they know each other and they go out of their way to get to know each other. And there's it's interesting, as polarizing as we are in America, and you would think that would definitely be the case in Mississippi too. The reality is, once you get underneath the covers and look at the Mississippi legislature and the bills that are passed there, what we find is that oftentimes some of the bills that have the most amount of success are bipartisanly supported. We don't talk enough about that. We only hear about the polarizing issues, but there's some great leadership in the Mississippi legislature as it relates to that. But, you know, with Election Day coming up, I think it's good to remember this. One other thing I want to mention is my friend Robert St. John, the restaurateur. He often reminds us, and he posted this within the last day or so, and I've read it on this show before, but it's a good reminder that we should seize the moment, and that the only thing we can be guaranteed is this moment. We can't worry about yesterday. We can certainly plan for tomorrow. But at the end of the day, the one thing that matters is this moment. And so it's something he looks at. He says he's got it on his mirror. He's got it on his desk. And he's always reminding himself about it. And here's what it says. This is the beginning of a new day. You have been given this day to use as you will. You can waste it or you can use it for good. What you do today is important because you are exchanging a day of your life for it. When tomorrow comes, this day will be gone forever. In its place is something you left behind. Let it be something good. You know, I've talked on the show a lot about legacy. And legacy at the end of the day, I mean, the way I see it now is really, it's the values, it's the sense of community, it's a sense of goodwill that you leave in your family members and the people who are closest to you. And I think if we would spend a little bit more time focusing on letting that be something good, man, we will be very happy about our legacies. Hey, I have a great show today. I've really been looking forward to getting to know this man. Representative Sam Creekmore represents District 14. He's from New Albany. If you don't know where New Albany is, for people who haven't really focused on your map, it's actually up in North Mississippi and about center of the state. I love that part of the state, incidentally, because I killed my first turkey in Walnut, Mississippi, with my friend George Hopkins. George, listen to me, Al Hopkins. I wanted to say George. Al Hopkins, God bless his soul. Love that part of the country, and I've been really looking forward to getting to know Sam Creekmore better. So let me welcome Sam to the Ricky Mathews Show. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good, Ricky, and so thankful to be on your show.
Well, listen, you heard what I said at the beginning, this quote from Muhammad Ali, but there's going to be some healing to be done after this election season is over, isn't there?
There is. But I mean, the people that serve, and if they do it out of love and for pure humanity and the care for the country, I mean, that's what it's all about. And that's what I see in the Mississippi legislature through most of the members. And so I hope our national guys, federal guys, are doing the same thing, and I think they are.
Yeah, I hope so too. And again, there will be some heal for those who want to heal. Too often, the polarizing ends are deciding the conversation that we're having in the public. And I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. Most people across America are somewhere in the middle. We agree on a lot of things, and that's just the way it is. It's unfortunate that polarizing ends are defining what we should be talking about.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you listened to the Joe Rogan podcast that he did with Trump. It just showed a whole nother side, or actual human side of Trump, and that he actually cared. And it was a good conversation.
Yeah. No, I agree. I've been a long time listener of Joe Rogan. I don't always agree with his guests or him, but at the end of the day, what we learn because of this long format conversation is you just learn a lot about a wide variety of subjects. And I think that conversation was very fitting for the kind of rhythm that Joe creates in his conversations, where he doesn't allow you to bring your talking points. He's going to get underneath sort of the facade and get to know the individual. And I wish that when you look at what we had the opportunity to see in his conversation with Donald Trump, it's really unfortunate that Kamala Harris didn't also agree to a similar format, because it would have been good for America to see that.
I thought the exact same thing. I would have loved to heard her in more of just a one-on-one conversation and see what she was all about. And to me, it's a lot like your show.
Yeah.
You do the same thing, although it doesn't last 3 hours.
No, it doesn't. I love the long form, and I'm really thrilled that when I agreed to do this show nearly 5 years ago, that Kim Dillon and Steve Davenport, Kim the president, of course, Steve the chairman of the board and owner of SuperTalk Mississippi Media, that they wanted a show like this. They wanted one where we could really get, beneath the headlines and have deeper conversations about the people who are working so hard to make a difference. That's one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to chatting with you, because you started your career after going to Mississippi State, you and your wife, in landscape architecture. And as you and I discussed before the show started, I learned from some of the best architects and planners after Katrina why it's important for us to focus on sense of place. I talk about it on this show all the time. You're deeply engaged in your community. You've evolved your business into design work. You've designed some cool things along the way, award-winning designs, and didn't choose to get into politics. You were elected in 2019. You started serving in 2020. You had a whole life before you went to the legislature. I love that part of you, Sam.
Well, thank you, Ricky. But no, I mean, you're raising a family and you're starting a business, and life is busy, and timing is so important if you're going to run for a public office. And it just was not my time prior to. The last time I ran for election was student body president of my high school. So I'd done it before, but it just worked out. I had a child. My youngest was a senior, and our prior legislator, Margaret Rogers, was not going to run again. So, some people hit me up, and I'd served on the school board, and I just saw this as an extension of my service to the schools, and education was very important to me, because to me that's essential for Mississippi, and we've done so much better in recent years.
Yeah. So but look, Sam, you think about life's experiences. Your commitment to the area where where you live and and that you love. Your Cotton States Baseball League work, and we'll chat about that here in just a second and why that was important to your community. And the design work that you've done in the sports arena, and all this stuff. It helps inform you, your activeness and your church and your wife too, because I don't want to leave her out, because it's very clear in reading more about you and studying you that you guys have approached everything as a partnership, and it's clear that guides you. I feel the same way about my wife, incidentally. But when we get back on the other side, we're going to start from the beginning. You were born, I think I remember this right, in Starkville, and then you evolved from there. And we're going to talk about some of the influences on your life along the way, and then we'll get into some of your passions in the legislature before we get done. But we'll continue this conversation with Representative Sam. Excuse me, I almost said it wrong. Creekmore. When we get back on the other side, we'll see you after this break. To the Ricky Mathews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. We're visiting today with Sam Creekmore. He's in the landscape architect business, and it's a pretty intensive business they developed over many years. He went to Mississippi State, was essentially born in Starkville, and now he's living in New Albany and loves that community with his wife, and very active in the community in lots of different ways. And he brings that incredible experience with him to the legislature, where he was elected in 2019 and began to serve in 2020. Sam, let's go back to growing up. Did you actually grow up in Starkville?
No, my parents were at Mississippi State and married young and had me. And my father's a physician. And so then he went to med school. So I lived in Jackson growing up and a little bit, and then did his internship in Savannah, Georgia, and then moved to New Albany to start a practice in 72 or 73. And so I was 6 then. So I started my education in the public schools here in New Albany, and that's where I grew up mostly. Yeah,
I got it. So, but the reality sounds like Mississippi State was always going to be in your future when you were growing up, huh?
We're a family of Bulldogs, yes. So it's ingrained in me, and I love it. That's where I met my wife, and actually going there this afternoon.
Oh, really? What you going to do? Tell me about it.
Well, Rob Robertson's in the legislature, and I'm going to meet with him, and we're looking at doing a tiny home, maybe a tiny home community in Starkville. So this is a project we're looking at.
Well, good for you. Joe Cloyd down here on the coast. I don't know if you know Joe. He was the aide de camp for Governor Barber in the just before and just after Hurricane Katrina, and then worked with him on the National Republican Governors Conference and all that. But he built a couple of Katrina cottage subdivisions, and was very, very, very successful doing it. He's going on to do lots of other things here in coastal Mississippi. But that tiny home thing is a thing, isn't it?
It's a real thing, and it really kind of started with the Katrina homes, and so Mississippi State, their architect students, they design and build them as projects, and so I think it's a good opportunity to marry the university and the tiny homes, and maybe even do a little community there in Starkville.
Well, that's really cool. You heard what I said a few minutes ago. When your values are rooted in a community like yours is in New Albany, and you bring your education and then entrepreneurship. I mean, you literally started from scratch, building your own business, and you've grown it into what it is today. When certainly you learned this at Mississippi State, but in your practice, you really developed a strong understanding of what you could do to add value to the community, what you could do to create even more of a sense of place for New Albany. And that seemed to have guided your entire practice. Is that true?
It is very true. I'm in the design business, and really the whole design process is problem solving. So you look at creative problem solving, really. And so you look at a project or an area, or even if you look at an issue, and you got to understand what the problem is, and then look at different solutions and come at it creatively. And I mean, honestly, that's what I love to do, and that feeds my creative instincts to solve problems.
Hey, do you think that B&A Bank Park was kind of the pinnacle of taking everything that you've learned and bringing it together in that moment? It certainly was nationally recognized. Or is it just one example of many that culminated your learning?
Well, that was an interesting project. There was New Albany had won several state championships, but only had 4 tennis courts in the city, and so there was a strong tennis community. B&A Bank is a tremendous bank regionally in North Mississippi, and so we needed money. So it was a community effort to go get a sponsor, and then the city joined in. It was a joint project with city and private businesses, and we were designing a project on I-22, so it's very visible, and solve an issue that was a need in New Albany. So it became a really neat unifying project for the entire city.
Well, so for people can understand it, what's interesting is if those of you who are listening who are from small communities, you know the role that youth sports and other sports can play in creating sort of economic opportunity for your community. It could lead to the development of hotels and all other kinds of benefit. You saw early on in your career that sports could play that role in New Albany, and then it evolves into your contributions to this B&A Park, bank park. How all that fits together is important, and it is really a great story. So why don't you tell a little bit about that?
Well, I'm a sports guy. I don't have many hobbies, and so my children all played sports. My daughter played college tennis. Both my boys played football, baseball, tennis, and my wife was a coach. She is a landscape architect, but after a while, just fed her passion for tennis, and she did that and coached at Blue Mountain College as well. So, it's always been in our blood. It's been our passion. So to have the opportunity to design a new tennis park was just right down, my alley and my passion. And it was just a community effort. And then, as I mentioned, B&A Bank was such a big part of that. But it involved the entire community. And so we had several meetings and we gained momentum, and it was all done with private and local money. It was no federal money came down. USTA I think gave $10,000, but on a multi-million-dollar project that, most of it was from here. So it was a great grassroots effort, and it's paid great dividends for our city. So as you mentioned, tourism, and as you're on the coast, is a big deal. And for North Mississippi and New Albany, it's really been helpful for tournaments and matches. And as part of that was a soccer complex, and we also incorporated a veterans memorial at the entrance there. So it's been really, really good for New Albany.
You've always kind of understood this. I mentioned at the beginning of the show about the Cotton States Baseball League that you helped to start in 2009. But man, this has really evolved into something big, hasn't it?
Yeah, and that was another project years ago. We've got a great sportsplex, but it was just kind of dated, and so we had this idea that if we could start a collegiate league in North Mississippi, all played in New Albany, because we got lots of junior colleges. We got State and Ole Miss within 30. An hour and a half to 30 minutes from New Albany. So they could feed this. These kids didn't have any place to go. Missouri, I think, was the closest place. So we started this collegiate league. And we've had people from all over the country. We've had a couple international players come here, and they spend the summer, and we play baseball. And so it was fun. And of course, it kind of evolved. We've started a high school league, and the college coaches of the college players actually coach the high school players. And so it's really become a really symbiotic relationship with kids and college players, and the high school kids can come watch their coaches play during the week, and then on the weekends they coach them. And so it's really neat. It's been fun. And of course, when my kids were playing, it really was fun for me.
Well, again, connecting back the use of the spaces in New Albany in unique and nationally recognized ways. I think about your work with the New Albany Sustainable Advisory. I wonder what goes through your head when you're riding through town, or maybe you're in the outskirts of town as the town continues to expand in whichever direction it is. What goes through your head? We got to do this there. We got to do this there. We got to pick that up. That's not being cut. I mean, what's going through your head?
Well, I'll tell you about the NASA is what we call it, New Albany Sustainable Advisory. It was a committee that the city had started, a beautification committee. And they asked me to be on it, and let's revamp this and make it where it's not just beautification. We're looking at everything through New Albany, and that's what we've done. And that's also gained momentum. But we've been able to do a lot of projects and hopefully influence leadership in the town. But I worked when I was at Mississippi State. I worked at Campus Landscape. And they did a study. The number 3 reason why people choose a university is the way it looks. And so, that's applied to where people live and where they choose to set up a business. And so we've kind of come out with that angle, how important our town looks, and to be able to grow New Albany and make it more sustainable. So that's our approach, and it's not just the looks, but the amenities we have, the access to golf carts and accessibility and that kind of thing, walkability.
It's really cool. It takes ground level, committed, doggedly determined citizens volunteering their time to bring together the community and make this a high priority. And it's great to see that you were involved in that. Hey, when we get back on the other side, as we continue our conversation with Representative Sam Creekmore, we're going to talk a little bit about what made him decide to get into the legislature, and then some of his passions, like mental health, for example, since he's been in the legislature. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. I think it's awesome that SuperTalk Mississippi has through its shows conversations of all sorts. You can name the show. We're having conversations about them, and one of the things I like about this show is that while you may hear Sam Creekmore, the representative from District 14 from New Albany, you may hear him on the show with Gerard from time to time, or Paul, or whoever else. But this show is about actually getting to know a little bit more about who this guy is. I mean, you may hear him on the radio, but you really haven't gotten to know him. And so what I like with these more longer form shows where we just have a conversation about someone who is leading in the state and their passions. We're going to get to the legislature here in just a second, because Sam's been working on some really important stuff related to mental health, something I deeply am concerned about in this state, something we've got to address on a number of fronts. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. But Sam, before we shift gears, I just want to tell me about your family.
That's one of my favorite subjects. But I'm from a family of strong-willed women. My mother, both my grandmothers, and my wife are all strong-willed, and so that's kind of my background and where I come from, and so you can imagine that makes a difference in people's lives. But I got a wife she's now come full circle back to the green industry. She's an extension agent for Mississippi State. She's been a tennis coach. She's been a teacher, and she helped start this business that we have. I have 3 wonderful children. 2 are married, and a daughter in California, in San Diego, is an attorney. My son works with me in the landscape industry, and then I have a son that's engaged, and he's a senior at Mississippi State in landscape architecture. So just very involved with their lives, and they've kind of really, my spare time, that's what I do, spend time with family.
That's my story too. And by the way, on the strong-willed women, that describes my life completely. In fact, on my mother's side of the family, there were 10 girls, grandkids, and 1 boy, and it was me. And there were some advantages to that and some disadvantages to that along the way. But yeah, my grandmothers on both sides were incredible women, very inspiring. My mother who just passed away in the last year, at the age of 89 was just an inspiration up until the moment she died. So I get that completely. And by the way, my wife is a second-generation Croatian and from Biloxi, Bahanovic. And I'm really thrilled to be part of that heritage and know that my kids are part of that heritage.
Yes.
So Sam, listen, you made the decision to run. We talked a little bit about that a few minutes ago. You're bringing this kind of life experience. It makes a difference when you have a long list of experience going into the legislature. You don't look at the legislature as a promotion in life. You look at the legislature as an opportunity to be able to make a contribution for your community and for the state. I see that very clearly. So at the end of the day, it's a very humbling thing, isn't it?
It's very humbling. I mean, when you walk into that Capitol, you realize you're here to serve, and this is the people's capital, and you're here to make Mississippi better. And make your community better as well. So, but the reason I ran, I mentioned I've been on the school board and saw an opportunity where I can make a difference to help education, but also the brain drain is real in Mississippi. And the census was being completed, and at that time, and I mentioned my daughter living in San Diego. She went out there to law school. She went to Millsaps and just loves Mississippi, but told me I want to go to California or somewhere to go to school and get the experience. I thought that was great. But Callie, look at this as a business trip. You go out there, do your thing, and then come back home. Well, she has not come back home, and she's got a wonderful life in San Diego. But it's like we can make a difference in Mississippi to make it more appealing, not just to keep our young people, but to attract other people to Mississippi. We don't need to be losing population. And so that, along with just the timing of my life, was the reason I got in the legislature. And I've tried to make a difference for Mississippi and my community.
The brain drain is a real issue. And one comment about that, but I'll share a quick story. My son, Justin, our youngest son, I have a daughter who's a teacher, and then another son who's a lawyer here in Coastal Mississippi. They live 10 minutes away. But my youngest son, Justin, lives in New York City and works for Price Waterhouse. He's the only one in my family that didn't go to Southern Miss. He went to Auburn, and he went on mission trips around the world, and he did international studies. And now, he wanted to be an international consultant, and that's exactly what he's doing now for Price Waterhouse. But he loves New York, and FaceTime makes it easier to be closer to your child if you've got one living in San Diego, and that's been wonderful. We're still very connected, and he travels with us and all of that. But I think that what's happening with the focus on economic development, which I think is really important for Mississippi, and I think that Tate Reeves has done a terrific job as it relates to that. The numbers bear it out. That this tide will rise and help all of us as we go forward. One of the things that I like about what's happening in Mississippi is you see the four-year universities, especially the community college and even some high schools, really beginning to connect to where the job force training opportunities are, and they're making adjustments in their training. For example, Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College, over 51% of their students are enrolled in non-traditional education now. And that's education combined with economic development are two of the quickest ways to get us where we need to go. And there's still a lot of work to be done in other areas. You're working on one in the mental health area, but that is, that's we've got to commit to that, don't we, Sam?
We do, and I think that's the core to economic development and economic growth is education, and that's part of the Republican platform. And and it's really a bipartisan topic. I mean, we all care about that and I hope we realize the importance of it. But that's the key to me for economic growth.
So, Sam, we have been focused on this show. We've had a series of unfortunate teen suicides in coastal Mississippi, and Jackson County has been working really hard, the Jackson County Chamber in particular, but other partners as well, on really bringing focus. They brought Hope Squad into the conversation that's happening in Jackson County now. In September, we had another teen suicide at, I think, D'Iberville, in D'Iberville. It's just, it's sad. It's sad to think about the pressures that are on young people. Now, look, the mental health challenges are not obviously isolated just to young people. They're a problem across America. If you go into the major cities, you can see where America, just in general, has dropped the ball when it comes to mental health. And then you add social media and all the other things to it, and the pressures on young people. And we really have a burning platform as it relates to mental health right now. And I see that you're deeply engaged in that. So how did that come about? And it is now a passion clearly for you, but talk to me about it.
Well, yeah, and I didn't choose necessarily to get in this. I was on the Judd B committee in the legislature, and we were having a hearing on why mental health people ended up in jail. And after the hearing, the chairman, Nick Bain, said, all right, we're going to put a study committee together and Creekmore is going to run it. Didn't warn me, didn't ask me or anything. So it started with that. And that's a God thing that just led him to choose me to put this in. And that's where it all started. So that was 2022. We started the committee on mental health. And in 2023, we were able to author a bill, 1222, that's made a difference in Mississippi. But I want to go back to the suicide rates. I mean, you're right. It's not a local thing or Mississippi. It's an epidemic across our country. And since 2010, suicides among our youth, girls are up 167%, boys are up 81%. I mean, this is scary stuff. And this is our youth, and I can relate it back to the cell phone or the iPhone and screen time. Adolescents are spending 7.5 hours a day in front of a screen and social media. So those are things that are important to us, and we need to look at legislatively to make a difference. But 1222 is where this started, the bill, and we were able to make so many times in a mental health situation, law enforcement's on the scene. And so we were able to legislate mental health first aid for every law enforcement officer. It's an 8-hour course. It helps them recognize the situation, de-escalate the situation, and realize what better prepare them to handle it. And that's made a difference. There was a situation in Tupelo not too long ago where the police officer, a child was in distress, had driven away from home, had said they were going to harm themselves. And the police officer intercepted it, recognized the situation, and was able to get that child help. So, I mean, 1222 has made a difference. And there were several other things in it that have made a difference in mental health.
When we come back for the final segment, we'll continue to boil it down. We've got the work of the mental health task force that's going on. I've had numerous conversations with Sean Tyndall about this, that poor first responders have to be lawyers. They got to be psychologists. And we often don't think about their psychology. And there's been an effort inside the Department of Safety to focus on the people who work there and helping get them the help that they need. It's really cool to see. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. We're visiting with Representative Sam Creekmore. He's from New Albany, and he's the president and principal landscape architect of Creekmore Landscape Limited in New Albany. And I've just enjoyed telling this story. In a lot of ways, it's his and his wife's story, because they've been on this journey together, his wife Warner and him. And they've made a great impact to their community and their church. And now Sam, in his role as a representative, is going to make an impact in the Mississippi legislature. But we talked about how he got into mental health. And, we talked a little bit about House Bill 1222 that resulted from their efforts in 2023. Then there was House Bill 1640. Well, I don't have a label for that one, Sam. Remind me what that was.
Well, 1640 was, again, a mental health bill. And it revised the whole process of how someone gets help. In the state of Mississippi, prior to 1640, the third step was the evaluation. So they had to go to the chancery clerk, through a judge, and then be evaluated. Well, I mean, that's pretty traumatic in itself to do those steps. We moved the evaluation to the very first part. So the community mental health centers if a family member needs help, they can go be evaluated right there, and then they don't have to necessarily go through all those steps. The problem can be solved as part of the evaluation. You need help, so go to the community mental health center, and so that's made a huge impact. That became law on July 1st. In the data that we received, there's been a 58% decrease in the number of admissions to the state hospitals from jail, from just that process change. And there's been a 60% decrease in the wait time that people have been in jail in the first 2 months of the bill. So that was a big part of it, and it's making a difference in Mississippi right now.
Yeah, that's great. So then to continue to look at this evolution, you got the K through 12 and post-secondary mental health task force. Mm-hmm. That has to be a passion of yours, given those statistics that you mentioned a few minutes ago.
Yeah, and since COVID and since with cell phones and social media, our youth are being bombarded, and we went over some statistics of suicide rates and depression. But so really, the K through 12 is so important for us to look at for mental health. And you mentioned the Hope Squad, but if we had all the money, and if we said, all right, let's put mental health counselors in every school, there's not enough people out there. There's not enough people in the healthcare industry to do that. So we're going to have to rely on school teachers, school counselors, and actually students to help us help each other. And you mentioned that quote at the very beginning, love each other. And that's what we need to do with our schools. And we're looking at some legislation to allow that to happen in schools. And I think it's so important, especially for our youth and going forward.
Well, listen, when I have conversations with Paige Roberts, the CEO of the Jackson County Chamber, and Emma Benoit, who she introduced me to, has been on the show, a suicide survivor who's getting national recognition. And we talk about the Hope Squad because you're right. I mean, there aren't enough resources you can hire to help. And at the end of the day, one of the problems that youth are facing is peer pressure and bullying or cyberbullying, and educating young people at a very young age about the role they have to play in their humanity with others is really important. Because you look at a teen suicide, oftentimes what you look at what was happening leading up to that, and while they may have had some mental health issues, the reality is that they were being bullied in some way. And we've got to, I think one of the great things about Hope Squad is that it helps to help students in general understand they have a role in the mental health of their friends.
Absolutely. We can all be mentors, and we are. We're all leaders in some capacity, whether a good leader or a bad leader. But that applies to students too, and they can help each other. And we got to give them the training, the kind of like the mental health first aid, to recognize situations in themselves and their peers, and they can help each other out. You mentioned the Jason White quote earlier. It's hard to tell somebody that horrible things. I know I'm messing up the quote, but
it's hard to be mad at somebody that you know.
Yeah, but it's easy on social media because you're hiding behind a phone or a tablet, and so those are things we're trying to overcome, and we need to tool our students give them the tools to understand that and incorporate love for one another and help for one another.
Well, listen, as you know, I finished my career as a digital media CEO. And so I have a very good understanding of what's happening with social media and how the algorithms works and TikTok and how it attracts young people and they can't let it go. It's just addicting. And we have got to focus on it as a nation. If we don't focus on it, if we don't pay attention to this, it's going to continue to eat us up. And one of the things is parents aren't playing their role. Well, my daughter is a teacher, and she told me about an 8-year-old whose parent gave them a smartphone, an 8-year-old. Think about that.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned my wife with Extension. She taught a course on etiquette to a group in Tupelo. They were third graders. And the first question she asked, how many of y'all have cell phones? Everyone in the class, third graders, everyone in the class.
Yeah, man, we're not moving in the right direction in that regard. But Sam, we're going to pick it up from there next time. We're going to continue this conversation about mental health in Mississippi and other passions that you might have. But it's been great to get to know you, my friend.
Oh, it's just the feeling's mutual. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, you bet. This has been Representative Sam Creekmore from New Albany, Mississippi, and a legislator. And I hope you've enjoyed as much as I have getting to know him better. Listen, have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.